Oh, what's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. I'm Bob Wankel alongside Anthony Sanfilippo. And Anthony, tough one in game three for the Phillies out in Arizona. We talk about the energy and the fans at Citizens Bank Park, and I don't know if that played a role in what we saw in game three, but it just looked like a team that was a little bit flat. And frankly, I was surprised that they struggled the way that they did against Diamondback starter Brandon Fought. And, you know, then it came down to the bullpen, and Craig Kimbrel couldn't be bothered to pitch to the timer, couldn't be bothered to hold on runners, couldn't be bothered to throw strikes. And it was a disastrous ninth inning. And here we are. And we have a series now. And I guess in some ways that we expected it to have somewhat of a series here. I don't know that we at any point thought the Phillies were going to win this thing in four, but a disappointing result nonetheless.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Bob. It was tough for me to really kind of dive in, especially late in the game, because I was doing the Flyers, the Snow the Goalie pregame show, but we had it on TV, like literally right in front of us. It was right across. We're up at the sports book at the Wells Fargo Center, and they have like a wall of televisions, and it was on three different TVs. And the version that it was it was funny because they were all different times. So like you're like trying to watch the one, and then you're like, oh, but the other one's earlier, right? So you're trying to go back to the other. But I watched pretty much the whole game as best I could. And tell me if I'm wrong. It looked like three people showed up to play this game, and the three people that showed up to play were Ranger Suarez, Jeff Hoffman, and Jose Alvarado, and the rest of the team was still left in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think that's more or less fair. Bryce Harper's on base a couple times. Brandon Marsh had a hit early, but I mean,
Yeah.
nobody in the lineup really came with it yesterday. And it's funny when you only have three hits, you only have a couple of bats with runners in scoring position, a couple late. You look at it and say, like, you're not going to win a game in the postseason with three hits. But it's funny, they really kind of had some opportunities to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that just in the way that they failed to protect the 1-0 lead in the seventh, or that Kimbrel failed to get out of the ninth. And I just thought really just a horrendous inning. I truly do. And I want to dig into that in a little bit. But I mean, you go back and look at some of the missed opportunities. They stranded Brandon Marsh earlier in the game after a 1-out double. And I really thought the key was, and nobody's really going to talk about this, but the inning that they actually took the lead in the seventh, they have a situation where they can kind of blow this game open. And you get a first and second, you get Bryson Stott at the plate, and he gets a 3-1 count, and you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, this is either ball four or a great matchup for him. He's going to get something in the zone. He's going to hook it into right field. They're going to score a run, set up a second and third. Like, you thought that was the situation where they were going to break this game open and put multiple runs on the board, and they were lucky to get one. Stott hits into the double play, which is kind of unlike him. You expect him to sort of seize the moment. It doesn't happen. They do benefit from the wild pitch, and then they immediately give it back. And frankly, you could look at it the other way and say they were lucky to escape some of the jams they did until they finally broke late. So it's just one of those games. It's a game that you felt was entirely winnable. At the same time, you kind of felt it coming. It just sort of felt like they didn't have it yesterday, and that the longer you let someone hang around this deep into the postseason, like, these teams are good too. They'll make you pay, and Arizona made them pay yesterday.
Yeah, and I'll tell you another person that I didn't think had a great game is Rob Thompson. I can't for the life of me understand why it was Kirkering in a 1-0 game when you've yet to bring him in that kind of leverage situation. You had opportunities to do that in the previous series, even with it being close. Every time he's come in has been pretty low leverage, right? And so why is he the guy you're going to, having not pitched in a one-run game in who knows how long? That surprised me.
Yeah, like how many guys do you see mop up a 10-0 win and then also come in to protect a 1-0 lead on the road in an NLCS game a couple days later? I mean, it's a weird mix for him. And I do think, like, full disclosure here, because we're getting a lot of new listeners coming in during the playoffs, and I'll let you go. But, Anthony, you're not exactly the guy that writes the "What is Rob Thompson doing" column. You're typically in the corner of the manager.
Yeah, I know. I like the manager. I think the manager does a really good job. And yet, I don't know what he was doing with that decision. it kind of, and I understand you had to go with, an inning and 2/3 with Alvarado, and you had to use Hoffman to get out of trouble early, which again, I'm not a fan of, but every manager does it in the playoffs. They start pulling their starters who are pitching well. And both guys did it yesterday. I mean, in all honesty, both Torey Lovullo did it. Lovullo did it with Fountain, and then and Thompson does it with Ranger. Although Rangers, I thought was a little bit more. It made a little bit more sense than when Arizona did it. So I'm not a big fan of that, and yet you're looking at it and say, okay, well, I guess we're going to go Kirkering here, and a one-run game, and he hasn't been used in that spot. And then when you go to Kimbrel in the ninth, and I understand why you go to Kimbrel in the ninth, and it's obvious the guy doesn't have it. Got to face his first few batters. Okay, fine. When you get the out at the plate, and the Diamondbacks, don't advance the runner from second to third on that same play. Like he did second and third, and it walked the batter, and in the play at the plate, and the runner from second is not really advancing. Like, I don't get it. Like, I just don't get what happened there. But at that moment, you sit there and go, all right, we got away with one. Get the guy out, because he's not doing well. And you had Strahm ready to go, and he sticks with Kimbrel. The second walk is the one that killed me. Which was that Perdomo?
Yes.
That's the one that killed me. That was like, I cannot believe he's in for this.
So if you go back and play this inning out, I hear you on the Kirkering move. It's a lot for a kid in that spot with such a lack of experience, major league experience, let alone, postseason experience.
Yeah.
It's a big ask. And, he's pitched in some tighter spots. You go back to Atlanta game 1, like it's not like, hey, this is the first time we've ever handed him the ball when it mattered, but it just felt like a different ask there. I was surprised they did it. I think it's certainly an indictment of the way they feel about Sir Anthony Dominguez right now. And it didn't work out, and they're lucky it wasn't worse. I do, though, in the moment feel like they have a lot of confidence in the kid. They obviously felt that he was capable of pitching that inning. It didn't work out, and so I don't want to clobber. Like I in real time, if I'm being honest, I was like, this is interesting, but I didn't go, I hate it. What are they doing? Like that wasn't my reaction. The ninth inning, though, I wanted to rip my hair out, and I wanted to do it for the reason that you said. In addition to this, like if you go through that ninth inning, it was what I would call an unprofessional performance. I really felt that way. You come in with Kimbrel, and I don't hate that he's in the game. I know a lot of people are going crazy over, Kimbrel in a tie game. It's not what he does. It never works. My thing is you have to make your pitches and you have to execute, especially when you're a veteran who's on the fringe of the Hall of Fame. Like, I need you to show up and do your job. And it's one thing to come out and walk the leadoff hitter, but it's the things that we talked about all year with this guy, that in a huge spot, in a game where they can just drop the hammer on Arizona, he comes out and does all of the things that we were worried about throughout the duration of the season. Leadoff walk, makes no attempt to hold on a base runner. In that leadoff walk, he almost had a pitch clock violation that would have led to ball 4. Like JT Realmuto had to go out to the mound and talk to him and stop the clock because he's not ready to go. Like, are you kidding me? It's the NLCS, man. It's a tie game in the 9th inning. You're not ready to go because you got to do your pre-pitch, whatever the hell you want to call it. Like, that to me, it just can't happen. Like that's it. I thought that was embarrassing. And then you don't hold on the runner. You get the reprieve. Your defense bails you out because you've essentially lost the game at this point. Once you have the runner on third, your defense makes a great play. And then you can't bear down and throw strikes to Perdomo. Like, come on, what are we doing? And in that moment, when they make the play, I'm thinking to myself, you got a reprieve, Rob. Like, this guy does not have it. This is an opportunity to get him out of the game. Go to Strahm, go lefty, and play to the 10th. And they didn't do it. I guess because it's a nod to their belief in his veteran
Well,
savviness. I mean, come on,
I'll tell
dude.
you the reason I think he didn't do it is because of, you get to Marte at the top of the lineup, and Marte is a better hitter right-handed than left. And
Okay.
so
I
I
mean,
mean, I'm not defending that because, again, I think it was wrong. I think this is one of those situations where you have to read the room and not worry about what's on your paper.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Not worry
Yeah,
about
you have to watch
yeah.
what you saw in that inning and say he does not have it. This does not feel right, and go get the guy and live to fight another out. Like, who cares about Marte if you can't get the guy out in front of you? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it was very frustrating, and I'm sure fans like you kind of have to reset, and like the morning after you sit there and say like, listen, they're up 2-1, they still have home field. They have a bullpen game tonight against an Arizona bullpen that's not particularly impressive. This still favors them, and you have Nola and Wheeler in the chamber, and you've got a 7-2 postseason record. Like, let's everybody take a deep breath here.
Hey,
It's
yeah.
fine. And like, we can have that conversation, but that does not mean that in the moment when you have an entirely winnable game or a game that you're competing in, you as a fan, like you want to rip your hair out when you can't execute in that spot, and they didn't execute in that spot.
Yeah, look, I have no defense of Craig Kimbrel whatsoever. It was a terrible. Everything you've said is right, but I do want to shift it back a little bit here, Bob, because Craig Kimbrel's not the reason they lost this game.
It is not.
He was the he lit the wick on fire, but I mean, this thing was kind of smoldering long before Craig Kimbrel ever saw the light of day, and you have to, while we can talk about the managerial decisions with the relief pitchers all we want, the Phillies looked terrible at the plate against Brandon Pfaadt. And at the beginning of the game, I was actually listening to the TBS broadcast because they had the volume on at the arena. And then eventually they, had to turn it off because warm-ups were happening. And, I was on the live show, so I couldn't really listen. I was watching. But they were making it sound like this guy was Roger Clemens, right? I mean, like the way he was throwing nothing special, and the Phillies were just swinging at pitches that were so far off the plate. They were trying to be uber aggressive with him, and I get it, but it's not like his fastball that were over the plate were coming in at 98. They were coming in at 93, and the Phillies were swinging. Phillies were swinging through them. And they're chasing pitches, and guys who had not been chasing at all this playoff season were chasing. I mean, Turner struck out on a bad pitch. Castellanos struck out on a bad pitch. Real Muto all of a sudden looked like JT Real Muto, who couldn't hit a ball back in August. Like, I mean, it was crazy all of a sudden how these guys just fell into this bad habit together.
Yeah, all at once. The first time through the order was especially tough to watch. They really expanded the strike zone. I mean, multiple strikeouts finished with balls that were anywhere between 6 to 18 inches off of the plate. I mean, they really opened things up. And then again with Dan Iassogna behind the plate, and I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about Dan Iassogna because I get it. Like you sit there and you watch an umpire that's that inconsistent, that's that poor, and is notoriously bad to begin with. And it's hard not to say, come on, like that's not good enough behind the plate. We got to have better. But I can't, in my list of reasoning, say like, okay, that he played a direct role in that loss yesterday. I just won't do it. I think that there's enough blame to go around on the guys that play the game to kind of absolve the umpire. But man, he was bad. For being real about it. But yeah, I mean, the first time through the order, they really took some poor at bats. I thought that they would get to him in the second time through. And the numbers sort of support that. Like if you look at Pfaadt, you see what he's done this season. And I mean, here you go. Like opponents the first time through had a 703 OPS against him this season. The second time through, they had an 859 OPS. The third time through, which is why Torey Lovullo went out and got him, which is why it was always going to be 2 times through the order and nothing more. Opponents were hitting 397 with a 1.193 OPS against them. So, like, I understand why they actually took him out, even though he was pitching so well. It was a surprising development though, because you look at the statistics, you see the 5.72 ERA, you know that he's not great at home. He had been okay in those 2 postseason starts or appearances, but you just expected them to do enough. Like I thought he threw the ball better and was better than what I expected, if I'm being blunt, but there was no reason to go, 3 for 28. There was no reason to strike out as many times as they did. It's baseball, it happens, but what a bad time for it to happen. This wasn't a throwaway game in the middle of June. And I know they point to, we had not seen him before. Like that was the rallying cry. Like, well, we've never seen him before. We saw video, but it's different. Like, come on. We keep talking about what this lineup had been: 941 OPS, the 284 batting average, 366 on base percentage, historic offense, unprecedented. Like, you got to go out and get me more than 3 hits.
I thought their approach was bad. And it was bad, I think, from the beginning, Bob, in the sense that even before the game, look, I'm not one of those guys who says that, they didn't take batting practice, that's why they didn't hit.
Right.
But let's be honest. The last time you batted in that stadium was in June, early June. Like, don't you think you might, let's readjust to the batter's eye out there? Let's just get, just a couple, even if it's a couple swings, just to kind of get used to it. Because, yeah, you're right. You've not seen the pitcher. They have that, whatchamacallit, tracks machine or whatever the heck it's called, where you can actually have the, each pitcher's delivery from your perspective, and you hit off that machine. Harper hits off it all the time, which he doesn't take regular BP. He just takes that, which makes you wonder, is he onto something? Like, is there something to that thing, right? Where he can actually hit off the pitcher before the pitcher comes into the game. They don't do this. Like, I don't know. It's like, what was the mentality going in? Like, we don't need it.
I think what you do is you say, like, we're so locked in right now. We're getting so many good swings up and down the lineup. Let's just take our work inside. Let's take our work in the cage, focus on what we need to focus on, and not worry about getting out there and lifting and maybe creating bad habits. And I mean, there's a thought process behind that, but
well, it didn't work. Whatever that thought process
did not work out yesterday.
Burn that sheet and say let's not pull that one out again. I mean, I don't know. I came into it, Bob, a little bit feeling a little bit differently going in, and I may feel different now than I did yesterday, but I kind of felt like yesterday was a more important game to get than today. Because you had Ranger Suarez on the mound, and boy, was he good.
Yeah.
Boy, was awesome. He good again. I mean, right now, there's nothing you could take away from these starting pitchers, because Wheeler, Nola, and Suarez have been sensational in the playoffs. I mean, better than any. I can't think of another top 3 in any playoff of my recent lifetime that came out and just dominated the way they're doing. Maddox, Glavine, Schmaltz shit right now is what they're doing. I mean, that's how good they are. Yeah. And you didn't need to give them a lot. Like, it's just, that's where the frustration is. Like, I believe that going in, that was the game to win out there. That tonight would be the one that you go, if they're going to lose one, it's probably going to be game 4, and not because they're throwing anything good at you. It's just that I felt like, okay, you're going to get a bullpen game. Sometimes those are tricky because it's a little bit hard to navigate matchups that are, right. You don't know who's coming when, and you got to kind of navigate that. And you're throwing in a 4th starter. Now, we were all under the impression from everything Rob had said to this point that it was going to be Taijuan Walker. And I firmly believe that if they won yesterday, it still was going to be Taijuan Walker tonight. That being said, I feel like now that they are in a series, they don't want to risk it being Taijuan Walker, and they're going to throw Christopher Sanchez in game 4, which makes me feel a little bit better.
So you think if they were winning this series 3-0, it would be nod to the veteran. He's been on the top step the whole playoff run. he won 15 games. We're going to give him an opportunity here.
Yeah, well, I mean,
But
because you
now that
feel
it's
like,
time to actually win the game, they're going with the guy they feel is better. Is that what
well,
you're
it's not.
telling me?
It's not. I don't think it's that simple. You're not far off. I think probably the thought process was, if you win Game 3, you've kind of broken the Diamondbacks, their spirit and their will, so that even if you get, even if Taijuan Walker has a typical Taijuan Walker start and you get behind 3-0 after 2 innings,
Sure.
it's not the end of the world because you have a 3-game cushion,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whereas now it's 2-1. If Taijuan Walker's out there and you get behind 3-0, all of a sudden this Diamondbacks team believes again.
Yeah.
Oh shit, we can win this series, and you don't want to put them in that position. I still don't think that they believe they can win the series right now. I think Arizona looks at it and feels like, all right, hey, we grinded, we got one, but man, they didn't play great. I mean, they didn't hit well. So,
Sure.
other than Ketel Marte, who hit for them? So like I think Arizona's kind of looking at this like, all right, we live to fight another day, but boy, we don't feel great about it. Whereas if you go out there tonight and they're jumping all over your starting pitcher, then all of a sudden they're feeling themselves again, and that's what you don't want. And so I think that's why it's Sanchez and not Walker.
I've advocated for Sanchez getting the ball in this spot. I thought that he won that opportunity on merit.
Yeah.
He threw strikes. He was effective in September. He flashed a pitch that actually had some swing and miss to it with the changeup. And now you just wonder about the layoff. It's been 3 weeks, 3+ weeks. So can he maintain the role that he was on after essentially being shut down? They throw simulated games and they get their work in. It's not like he's just been sitting around collecting dust for almost a month, but it's different. And it's certainly different when you're in the playoffs and you're pitching with pressure on the road in an NLCS game. And so there's a lot of unknowns going into this, as there are anytime anybody takes the ball. But, we have not seen him do it yet in October. And so you're in a little bit of a hold your breath spot. And before we kind of look ahead and break down Game 4, I just want to go back, and you said it. You felt like with Ranger Suarez on the mound, as good as he's been in the postseason throughout his career, that this was an opportunity.
Yeah.
Because you, on the other side of it, no matter what they were bringing to the table, no matter if he pitched the game of his life or he didn't, you felt like Ranger Suarez was a significant advantage over to anything that the Diamondbacks were going to put out there. And at least if this thing were to get to a 7th game, which nobody wants to see, you do feel good about giving the ball to Ranger Suarez in the biggest of spots, back at home. This postseason in 3 games, he has a 0.64 ERA in 14 innings pitched, a 0.64 whip. His postseason career, he has a 0.94 ERA in 8 games, 0.84 whip. I mean, you're talking about, you start looking at guys that appeared in more than a handful of games. You start looking at that ERA. You start looking at like that base runner prevention, and he's right up there with anybody. If you would have told me they lost the game 7-4 yesterday, like Ranger just wasn't sharp, they hit a little bit, missed some opportunities, I would have been annoyed by that for an entirely different set of reasons. But I would have said, like, okay, like I could see that. If you would have told me yesterday morning that Ranger Suarez was going to pitch into the 6th inning and not allow a run, I would have said, well, they're going to wrap this thing up on Friday night. And that's disappointing because that lineup didn't do it. And you look at the 9th inning, especially with the top of the order, like you go back to that 9th inning and you get the guys that you want up in that spot, and they couldn't get it done. And like the Alec Bohm at bat late, like you get 2 fastballs down the middle, you take them both. And like he battled and saw some pitches and worked the count back, and then he strikes out. Like, come on, man. Like,
well, especially the second one, because the first one is, he thought it was outside. It looks like it caught the corner, and they got away with one with a bad call by Iasonia. But then the second one is, I mean, I know it's on the inner half, but you got to be like, okay, I just got away with one. I got to protect on anything close. Yeah. And he didn't. He just left the bat on his shoulder. Just kind of disappointed. Which, by the way, talking about bad umpire calls, not that it change the game, but it certainly had an impact in that ninth inning. What the hell was it on the non-swing on Perdomo?
Yeah.
I mean, that was so egregious. That bat was a foot in front of the plate, and it got called for that he held up, that he checked it. It was like, are you serious? I've seen worse calls bad calls the other way, where you say, I don't know if that went across, but then that one was well across, and it was like, oh, it's a ball.
Yeah.
It
was bad.
Oh my God, that was terrible. I'm going to say something really stupid here, Bob. I'm going to say something really stupid, but I want people when this series is over, I want you to think back on me saying something really stupid, and say, you know what, maybe it wasn't as bad as what Anthony said. It's probably not the worst thing in the world that they lost yesterday.
Yeah, that's stupid. Go ahead.
Okay, but I'm going to explain it. And in the moment, it does not sound like a smart thing to say in the moment. But I want you to fast forward and say, all right, we're going to we got to play this a little bit longer of a series. It's certainly going to be 5 games now, so it's definitely going through Saturday. It may go 6 if they lose one more of these next 2, and then you're going into Monday, and nobody really wants to have to force it that to come back to Philly. I get it, all that good stuff. World Series doesn't start till next Friday. The Houston Astros obliterated Texas last night. You were talking about a team that just said, "Oh
the Astros are going to win that series."
You thought you guys, just because you won the first 2 games, were now going to just coast past the defending champs. Yeah. Let's show you a little something. And they showed you a little something yesterday.
Yeah.
That series is now going to go at least 6. We know that for certain. There's a real good possibility it goes 7. So that's going into next week. Did you really want the Phillies sitting around for 6-7 days, doing nothing, waiting for an opponent while they're battling out through a 7-game series that gets you through next week, and then all of a sudden they're like raring to go, coming off of an emotional high, and you've been sitting around doing nothing? You see what happened with the Phillies got a little fat, right? Yesterday. You saw what happened. That the last thing you want is to have a veteran team, especially if it's Houston, a veteran team who knows how to win, coming into Philadelphia in game 1 of a World Series, and not intimidated by the crowd or the moment, and you've been sitting around doing nothing for a week. It's the last thing you want. I'm sorry. And so it may sound stupid today that it wasn't a bad thing that the Phillies lost yesterday. But when we get to the World Series, and believe me, folks, we are going to get to the World Series. When we get there, you'll look back and say, probably was a good thing.
Well, what's the threshold for that, though? Is it you play one more day and wrap this thing up on Saturday night and feel good about it? Or is it now coming back to Citizens Bank Park? Because I would make the argument that, what's the difference between Friday and Saturday? It's still basically a week. Sure, if this thing gets to the front end of next week, yeah, but certainly you don't want to see that. You don't want this thing back in Philadelphia, and tonight is so important, right? Because now here you go, it's a tie series. The series is tied up 2-2. You're giving the ball to Gallen. He's been better at home. He just saw this lineup. I know the Phillies just saw him too, and they had success. But now you're really in a series. In what scenario they come back to Philly down 3-2, and then
that you can't have happen. That you can't have happen. I mean, look, if they're up 3-2 and it's coming back for a game 6, which, by the way, Bob, you said the series was going to go 6.
I did.
Right? Okay, you said the series was going to go 6. I'm the one who went with 5. So we should kind of be in the different roles here. But I'm not. I'm going to be the more optimistic one than you.
Shocker.
But if you're up 3-2, then I think that you're saying, all right, we didn't want to come back to Philly, but we only have to win 1 out of 2, and we got Nola and Suarez going in front of our fans where we don't lose. I mean, I sent you a text yesterday, and I'll update the numbers. But so far this year in the playoffs, Phillies are 6-0 at home. Everyone else is 7-16 at home. Just think about that for a second. The entirety of baseball in the playoffs is 7-16 in their home parks in the playoffs. The Phillies are undefeated. So, even up 3-2, you didn't want to come back, but they're not losing 2 games in a row at home to the Diamondbacks. It's just not going to happen.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, I guess let me try to pin you down, and I'll ask you what happens tonight. What happens Saturday night?
Well, we got to talk
The
about. I mean,
result here.
I like Suarez. I mean, Sanchez going tonight. I really do. I'm a big fan of of that decision in this spot. I don't think Taijuan Walker is out of the conversation, though. I think this is one of those situations where they probably are going to piggyback it. And I wouldn't be surprised. Unless Sanchez is cruising, in which case they'll let him go the 5 innings or 5+, like they did with Suarez yesterday. But I do see a world where he throws 2 2/3, 3 innings, and if Arizona gets him for a run or two, that Taijuan Walker is the first guy out of the bullpen.
Right.
So I do think that that's a possibility. It's the possibility that I would less like to see. And like I mentioned earlier, bullpen games are not fun to face. I know that people get like, oh my god, they don't even have a starter. You should kill the bullpen team, especially when they don't have a good bullpen. But the one advantage is for the team that's throwing the bullpen game is they can kind of follow a plan of these guys against your guys, like who we want pitching against your guys in these certain innings. And it maybe makes that bullpen a little bit better just because you don't know the order that they're coming and you got to kind of adjust on the fly. So that just makes it a little bit tougher. I think it's a close game tonight. And I thought the Phillies were going to win yesterday, but I think this one's a close game. But I do think that the Phillies will win this one. I think that both teams will get a few runs in this game, but I'll go something like Phillies winning this one like 6-4 is kind of how I see this one.
Yeah, the game total is set at 9. I think it'll go over. I do expect offense tonight. I think the Phillies bats will heat back up. I don't think at some point, I don't love Arizona's offense, but they will score some runs here, and I kind of expect that to happen tonight. So the way I kind of see this unfolding, however, is that they will I think this thing is coming back here. I do. I think that the Phillies will get one. I think that they're good enough to not roll over and lose all 3 out in Arizona. One thing that we know about this team is that they are so resilient. We've talked about this really numerous times dating back to last season. Every time this team takes a tough loss, or you kind of think like, uh-oh, here we go, or what's the lasting impact of the way that loss occurred? Not just that they lose a game, but how they lose a game. We see all the time bad losses. They spiral into multiple bad losses. This team has a really unique way of just saying, nope, no sweat. We're right back at it. And they're going to need that again here now. I think that they will win tonight. I have a weird feeling about Galen in game 5. And I do think that it comes back here. And I think that it's Aaron Nola. How about this? I think it's Aaron Nola that stops this thing in a game 6. And so I'll stick with what I said before the series, but we'll see. I mean, I surely hope that it doesn't come back here. I really don't. I'm not in for the anxiety. I would gladly roll the dice on sitting around and letting the Astros get all lathered up next week while the Phillies stand idle. It's a risk I'd be willing to take at this point.
Yeah, well, I'm going to stick with my prediction that the Phillies don't come back here. And tonight, obviously, is the Waterloo game for that prediction. You lose one, and then I'm wrong, and then you're right, and they come back to Philadelphia. But I, as much as you have a feeling about Zach Gallen, are the Diamondbacks going to hit Zach Wheeler?
I know. I get it.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, you could shove, Zach Gallen at home all you want. I'm still throwing the best pitcher left in the tournament.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that Zach Wheeler is the best pitcher left in the tournament, and I don't know that I could compliment Zach Wheeler any more than I have on this show or on Crossing Broad or in a newsletter. But I just, it's a funny game. They lost a game yesterday where the starting pitcher didn't allow a run into the 6th inning, and they found a way to not win the game. And I think that something similar might happen on Saturday night. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, give me Houston too. I will just say that if the Phillies advance, I'm not saying that they absolutely will. But But if the Phillies advance, give me the Astros. It's the only way.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get home field advantage against the Astros. That's a huge
Yeah.
thing. And of course, everybody wants revenge. I mean, that's a
Of
great
course.
story. Which
It's a
kind of
great
leads
story.
me. It kind of leads me into one last thing, Bob.
Sure.
The ratings on TV. They were not good after the wild card round and the division series round. There was an 18% drop off in the wild card round. There was an 8.8% drop in the division series round. You know, all those casual fans that baseball was expecting to bring back come their most important games, and less people were watching. Glad we did that. Glad we brought in the casual fan. That said, and that's my one shot at them for this. That said, numbers for the NLCS been pretty good so far, surprisingly so. And I think that I'm going to make a statement here. Baseball's thankful that it has the Phillies, because the Phillies have become a really good national story. Last year, they were only exciting to us in Philadelphia. It was a fun story in Philadelphia, right? It was great in Philadelphia, but I'm not certain that the nation kind of got into the Phillies last year on that run. The nation is sure into the Phillies this year.
Yeah.
Phillies Atlanta Braves series had averaged 4.6 million viewers per game. And that was the highest average for an NLDS series on TBS in 8 years. Okay, that's pretty darn good. So far, the Phillies Diamondbacks are averaging 5.3 million for the NLCS. So even more are watching against a less exciting opponent.
Yeah.
And I know the Arizona market's a big market, right?
Market.
I mean, Phoenix is one of the top 5 cities in America in size, but it's the Diamondbacks. I mean, we know that there's not a lot of interest out there. The tickets were selling for as low as $15 for Game 3. So I think that Major League Baseball is looking at this saying the Phillies are saving our bacon, because without them, they might not have very good TV ratings for their playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, what the Astros have done is it's been remarkable. I know that there was some cheating scandals mixed in there and stuff, but their consistency has been remarkably impressive. I don't think it's been particularly compelling to the nation. The Texas Rangers, I think, in a lot of ways are similar to what you said with the Phillies last year, where, you know, they're probably interesting in Arlington and in Dallas. But from a national perspective, I don't look at the Rangers and say, wow, this is must-see TV. Good team, a lot of good players, and they hit and they can do a lot of different things, but they're not like a team that a casual fan, I think, is going to gravitate towards. Arizona, same thing. I mean, that it's like watching paint dry.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that as like a knock at their ability to compete. Like, they're a good team. They're going to continue to win games, I think, beyond this season. They're probably only going to get better. But, you know, you watch that series, like, tell me what excites you about the Diamondbacks. It's the Phillies with the celebrations. The fans have played a part in the storyline. I think maybe to this point it's gotten just like, okay, let's like just focus on baseball now. I'm getting a little grumpy, but there's just so many different compelling things about what they're doing. Like, Harper's a certified star. Schwarber's fun to watch. The Castellanos stuff with his son. Like, I mean, there's just every time you turn around, there's something pretty cool about the Phillies and the Phillies experience. So I think we said this, or I might have said this on the show Monday, but if you're Major League Baseball, like, you're not going to do anything to dictate the outcomes of the games, but you are praying to God that the Phillies are the team that's in the World Series from the National League. I do know that much.
Well, I'll tell you this. Baseball might get their best World Series ratings that they've had in a long, long time if it's Phillies Astros.
Yeah.
Because a rematch of the World Series doesn't happen all the time. It would only be the 10th time in the history of baseball, and it would be the first time in, 45 years or whatever it is, since Yankees Dodgers in 77 and 78. I think there would be a real compelling story there with all the excitement around the Phillies that they've become, garnered national attention, and the Astros trying to become the first team to repeat in this century, like in a rematch. Like there would be such a great storyline there. I think baseball would get great numbers, and I want to say this. Some people might message us and say, well, they're averaging 7.2 million viewers on Texas and Houston, which is even more than the Phillies against the Diamondbacks. I get it. Two things to keep in mind there: one, it's on Fox, which is a broadcast network, and two, they had a lead-in on Sunday coming off of the NFL that had 26 point something million viewers watching the Eagles and the Jets.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will. Yeah, which was, by the way, like the highest rated Fox late window game of the year. I read, like, Eagles Jets.
I know. Well, it's New York, right?
I will say this though, to just combat that a little bit. I mean, Game 3, which took place, I can't even keep my days straight here, Wednesday night. That was an FS1 game. So I don't know if that you have that broken out by game, but like that game actually showed up on FS1. But
but it probably. Well, I didn't realize that was an FS1. That wasn't on Fox directly.
Yeah,
it was FS1.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Then maybe I am. Maybe Houston has a little bit more appeal.
Maybe America loves a villain.
That's what it is, right? Everybody wants to see the Astros lose. Maybe that is a case then. All right.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, we will be back on Monday, hopefully talking about a World Series matchup and reflecting on the 5-game NLCS victory.
Well, we won't have. I don't think we'll know the matchup Monday, right?
Yeah, I guess we won't know. Well, yeah.
When is it? Their Game 5 is tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it could be because Game 6 would be Sunday. Yeah,
someone's got to do it in 6.
Yeah, someone would have to win the next 2. Yeah, so it's possible.
So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, we're not biting our fingernails here over a decisive Game 6 or a must-win Game 6. God forbid.
Right.
I just don't think the city could handle that. As positive as everybody's been to this point, if the Phillies are trailing 3-2 in this series, wait until you hear the anxiety on Monday. Oh my
Holy
God.
Cow. Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, we'll be back on Monday either way. For Anthony Sanfilippo, I'm Bob Wankel. Thanks for listening to Crossed Up. You can follow Anthony at Philly on Twitter. You can follow me at Bob_Wankel. Follow the show at Up Phillies. Make sure you check us out on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you watch or get shows. And we'll talk to you next week.